Good morning and welcome to the Universitätsclub Bonn. On behalf of the organizers, the Hochschule Bonn-Rhein-Sieg, the Department for International Development from the UK, the GIZ and BMZ, I'm very happy to welcome you here today. My name is Sebastian Kuhn. I am, if you will, the master of ceremony of what's happening here today. We've got a great project, a great agenda collected for you, and it is my privilege to run you through what we've got planned for you today, very quickly. So we've got 3 sessions that we will be doing. We have some welcoming addresses in the beginning now. Then we will have session 1, integrated information management. What is it and what does it look like? Then after a quick break, we'll have session 2, technology frontiers, newest applications and their use for integrated information management, followed by lunch, and session 3, implementing digital social protection, current challenges at national and international level, with a conclusion and a wrap-up. And that would be the day. Now, we have a team that is here for your support. You see the colleagues standing here with the white t-shirts. If you need any assistance with anything, they are happy to help. And we also have to look a little bit at time, because as you can see, we've got a lot planned today. So when you hear the bell, as you heard just now, that will be the signal to please come back to this venue so that we can continue with the program. Let me first get a feeling for who's in the room here today. So who of you, and maybe by a show of hand, had a journey more than 3 hours to get here this morning? That's not this morning, or to come to Bonn to this conference of more than 3 hours. Okay, that's some more. Thank you. Who attended the GIZ symposium? Globalization Revisited, that's a lot. Okay, thank you. Who would say that they're a digital native? Ooh. Okay, maybe we ask that question towards the end of the day again as well, and we'll see whether this changes a little bit. Right. So without further ado, I would say we're going to get started. The hosts have asked me to say that it is fine to bring drinks and food into the venue, but please make sure to take them out after the sessions as well, so that they can take care of everything. And with this, I would like to hand over to Professor Dr. Iris Groß, Vice President for Teaching and Studying here at Hochschule Bonn-Rhein-Sieg. The floor is yours.
So good morning to all of you and a hearty welcome on behalf of the University of Applied Science, Hochschule Bonn-Rhein-Sieg. I want especially greet Mr. Andreas Proksch of GIZ and as well Alistair Egger of DFID, and wish welcome to all of you. And I am glad that we will have this fruitful conference here. I have read the inviting the program, and I was really deeply impressed what you all will be talking about things that I don't know too much about, because I'm just a mechanical engineer. Not even a computer scientist, and I think it should be quite good to have some knowledge about it, else I would not understand what you're talking about. I have often discussions about digitalizations, and sometimes I ask myself, what's going on? Why are we suddenly in such an excitement? What is really the change? And once in a little discussion, I asked, what is really the difference? Because I'm sitting in front of a computer since 20 years, I would say, all my work life long. And they all sat like this and wondered, and then one said, we all have smartphones. And I would say, yes, that's the greatest change in our life. We all are sitting here. You're just feeling there's a smartphone somewhere. Some of them are maybe already humming and telling you that you should pay attention. Maybe you store it in your case, but they influence our life every minute and change our daily family life. As many of us know, they change our way to educate our children, and they are the access to the world of digitalization for many people in many countries which maybe would not have had a computer. So I would say this is the basic change of life and of basic instrument for digitalization that is really the difference to me. I don't know to which conclusion you will come today, but I, for example, I have an app with which I can scan my bills from the doctor, and then it's passed to the security, to the insurance. Thank you. I'm not so trained in the words of your business, of your daily business. I see. So their digitalization has already taken place, and I think it will go on. In my daily life, of course, we try to use it in fields of teaching, but we are also now implementing a new data management system in our university, and I see that it is a lot of work and that it will bring with it a lot of changes in the way that we organize our daily work, and we have to prepare our people. They are afraid that there will be changes. We have to implement data security, and maybe you will face the same problems when you try to implement systems like that, and then you have the people which may be digital illiterate and are not able to handle this, and maybe these are especially the older ones and those one who would need it or would have suffer of more illnesses, so they would urgently need access, and you have to train them. So the whole system has to be changed that everybody can take part in it. I am glad that you come together from so many different countries. This is the positive chance of digitalization. We cannot share our cars. When I have a car, you cannot use it in Turkey or somewhere else, but we can share our software and we can share our idea. That's a big difference, and that is why it's always a big community coming together when you are talking about digital solutions. I really like this, and I hope that you will have a really fruitful conference where everyone can have his benefit or her benefit from.
Thank you, Professor Groß. Next up is Andreas Proksch, the Director General of the GIZ Sector and Global Program.
Good morning and a warm welcome to everyone, particularly to you, Professor Dr. Groß, for your friendly words and for hosting us in such a beautiful environment very close to the river Rhine and in such a peaceful place where it's good to sit together and to talk. And also a particular welcome to you, Mr. Alistair Ager, representing a very dear and important partner of us, the Department for International Development, DFID. It's always good to have you here, and in spite of the international discussions we are having, hoping to have you here in future as well, very often. And I would also very much like to welcome Mrs. Ruff from our Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. Without your generous support, it would not be able to meet here, and you are really one of the drivers of the subject we are dealing with, and a great thank you for this as well. In times when we sometimes feel the world falls apart, it's very good, at least from time to time, not to talk about Trump, about failing democracies, about Brexit, about migration, about the Near East, but to remind ourselves what really counts in the world. And the international community has now the great consent on what really counts, the SDGs and the Agenda 2030. And for me, the most important aspects of the SDG are not only the 70s Sustainable Development Goals, but even more so the underlying principles. And out of these principles, the most important underlying principle is leaving no one behind. And so I'm particularly glad that we are again and more focusing on social protection, dealing with those who need the support of the society, and how this support of society for the weaker section can be organized in a very efficient and very good and functioning way. And this is what you came together to discuss today. It is indeed a crossroad and a crucial year for the universal social protection movement. This symposium, it provides a timely and strategic occasion to explore and define one key element to reach people with social protection at scale, tying the digital knots of social protection. I saw in my name tag here that you have a wonderful blue ribbon and that it's very appropriate to tie knots, so I will tie already the first knot, hoping that many knots will be tied during this discussion today. There's a strong commitment among the international community to achieve universal social protection, or USP, meaning covering the entire population so that all those who desperately need it whenever exposed to risk have equitable access to schemes that protect them from the potential negative economic consequences. USP does not follow a one-size-fits-all approach. Not everyone needs to achieve and needs to receive the same benefit to be fully protected. While equal access should be granted to those with equal needs, those with greater needs should have greater access. This is why we need a systemic approach. That's why we need social protection systems. As part of the system, different elements need to work together to be able to match efficiently existing demands of people with the supply offered by different actors. This is why we need integrated information management due to its ability to match information about demand and supply. Integrated information management allows systems to be responsive to the needs of the people, of the population, efficient in the delivery of services, and ultimately achieve a high impact. Information systems are not new, as much as digitalization is not new, as you were telling, but still I think every one of us agrees that we are in a new period of, once again, an acceleration of developments which gain from time to time a new quality. Information systems still are very often designed to optimize the delivery of a specific program or project. The result is fragmented information tied to a specific system which cannot be used for a better service delivery across the whole sector. We have pockets of information with every ministry, every agency supporting them, but often common standards and agreements are lacking. Information is generated time and again, wasting valuable resources. Integrated information management is about agreeing what information is to be collected and can ideally be used to serve multiple programs forming a system. It's pivotal to come to an agreement on how information is exchanged about programs within systems and when and where this exchange would be useful at all. Integrated information management allows us to build social protection systems which can expand coverage in times of shocks and crisis. It allows us to build systems which can facilitate the linkage of programs within and beyond the sector. And they allow us to be able to accommodate groups which are still advantaged in societies like women, but also groups that need special attention, like groups with disabilities, and social protection systems which have the foundation built in to ensure the move towards the truly universal social protection. Talking about integration management system, integrated information management systems may sound quite trivial. Blockchain, artificial intelligence, mass data, machine learning, these are some of the buzzwords at digital events. Nowadays, we will scrutinize and examine these as well today. But the focus of today's discussion is on getting the basics right. These basics are integrated information management system. We need a common and jointly developed understanding of what we mean when we are talking about such system. This shared understanding will help us when working with partners, providing advice, technical expertise, and funding, and ensuring that not only us here in the room, but our partners in our partner countries really can apply and work with the systems which we are designing. Let me first thank once again you, Professor Gross, and the Bonn-Sieg University of Applied Science for welcoming us here, DFID and the BMZ for their support of this event. And now I wish you a very fruitful and excellent conference here in Bonn. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Proksch. Also, thank you for pointing out the blue ribbon. In case everyone has spotted their ribbon yet in their name tag, please keep it for later. You'll get more instructions on that later as well. Thank you very much. And with this, over to DFID. Before Professor Alistair Ager, Deputy Chief Scientific Advisor, who's here with us today, of DFID, will have his welcoming speech. We first hear a video message by Richard Clark, who is the Director General of DFID.
Good morning, good morgen. The UK is committed to tackling extreme poverty and reducing inequality. We believe that social protection and digital are fundamental to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and ensuring no one is left behind. Social protection and digital technologies play a critical role in this. Across Africa, Asia and the Middle East, we are supporting partner governments to develop inclusive protection systems that protect the poorest and most vulnerable people, including people with disabilities, women and girls, and those affected by crises. Social protection works. It reduces poverty, helps build human capital, supports economic development, and helps people to cope with shocks. But it could work better. With better information systems and integration across programs, we can make sure that the right people receive the right transfer amounts at the right time, and that they have access to other benefits and services that they need. Technology, we believe, is critical to achieving integration. That's why DFID launched our digital strategy entitled Doing Development in a Digital World earlier this year. It sets out our commitment to harness the potential of technological innovation to tackle global poverty and to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. We are really keen to hear from others and to collaborate on how digital technologies can best be used in delivering more effective social protection for all. We see this conference as the start of this really important conversation. Thank you so much to our co-hosts, GIZ, BMZ, and the Hochschule Bonn-Rhein-Sieg University of Applied Sciences. I would love to have been there today, and I'm sorry I can't, but in my absence, I wish you productive discussions and leave you in the very capable hands of Professor Alistair Ager, DFID's Deputy Chief Scientific Advisor.
Thank you. So it just gives me the opportunity to add to those words of welcome and encouragement from Richard to clarify briefly why DFID is excited to be involved in this event, what we hope to focus on and achieve within it, and how we proceed together forward within that. As Richard said, I'm the Deputy Chief Scientific Advisor. I'm an academic seconded into DFID with the responsibility for DFID to make the best use of science and technological knowledge. And I've had the privilege of leading a strategy over recent months in harnessing technological innovation for development. DFID invests significantly already in innovation, but like both Iris and Andreas hinted at, the rate of change of the technological landscape and the opportunities require us to re-strategize and to reflect what it means to be technologically engaged and engaging in innovation at this era. Within the Harnessing Technological Innovation for Development strategy, we have a particular commitment that harnessing word we think is quite useful to us. Technological change is happening not because of anything that DFID might do, but despite anything we might do, it's happening in the world around us. And our opportunity is to make certain choices, certain leverages, certain investments that help direct some of the benefits through technological innovation to the world's poorest, to really address those sustainable development goals. And an example of that approach is very much the precursor of some of this work was this digital strategy, which I think has this wonderful title of doing development in a digital world. It's not anything that DFID might be doing about bringing digital into our programming, but acknowledging that the digital world is out there in all countries of the world. It's about harnessing and engaging with that and beginning to understand what that means for development programming in the 21st century. So that's why we're excited about this area of work and what brings us here. In terms of what our colleagues in the social protection team and emerging policy innovation team very much reinforce the message that Andreas touched on about the importance of integration. Integration being the central concept that we'll be addressing today. So if we ask ourselves, why does integration of information matter? What are the benefits for the social protection sector? Fundamentally, it's to deliver more efficient and responsive social protection services, ensuring we are reaching and including those furthest behind. Again, reflecting on Andreas' comments, I was thinking what we would see as the converse of integration. And maybe it is fragmentation, a phrase there. And what does fragmentation mean? It means leaving people behind. So greater integration in social protection can enable inclusion. It can provide a doorway to access a range of services and benefits, improving coverage for vulnerable groups, women, people with disabilities, and crisis-affected populations. Understanding who is poor and excluded, where and why, is critical to guide action, monitor progress, and ensure accountability. We can't transform poverty with a fragmented picture of needs and vulnerability and who is able to access services and support. For example, we know that women are less likely to have a personal identification than men. As a result, they are less likely to be able to access social protection, but this can also limit their access to a range of other essential services. Equally, weak data disaggregation can mean that people with disabilities are just not visible to service systems. So integration is crucial. It moves beyond individual programs and builds a more complete picture of vulnerabilities, allowing us to respond more effectively and efficiently and link people to a wider range of services and support. More integrated information systems can further open up opportunities for people, not just access social protection, but also to exercise their rights as citizens. We're struck by our work with the government of Pakistan, partnering with the National ID Agency, NADRA, to speed up civic registration for millions of women, which has not only increased their access to cash transfers, which is important in its own right, and other social assistance programs, but has given these women the opportunity to vote for the first time in their lives because of the integration of the data systems. Integrated information management can also help us to respond more quickly and efficiently to disasters. We reflect on our work in Kenya with the Hunger Safety Net program, which covers the whole population of 4 drought-prone counties in northern Kenya. And the registry there has enabled the program to scale up in times of drought and has improved access to additional services for those populations. So that's what we think we need to engage in today, and I think we have a very much similar vision of the importance of integration, not just as a technical challenge, but as a moral commitment to leave no one behind. How do we think we're going to do that? Well, we very much have enjoyed working with colleagues in planning the agenda, seeing that integration information management needs to be driven by the intended policy objectives, clarifying our objectives, with the belief that the right technological solutions will then follow. That's very much echoing the harnessing technology for development mantra of not being technology-led, but being development challenge-led, and then crowding in the capacities of technological innovators. So we need to put citizens at the center of the design of integration information systems, streamlining our processes and making sure systems work for them. There are many opportunities, but there are also fundamental risks and challenges we think we need to address today, particularly around data protection and privacy, risks of multiple exclusions from programs and other things. So today we'll look at both the opportunities and the challenges, and we'll discuss the building blocks for maximizing the benefits and mitigating the risks. And we anticipate that these building blocks will guide and coordinate our action on integrated information systems going forward. So I want to thank again our co-organizers, GIZ, the Hochschule Bonn-Rhein-Sieg, and BMZ, and all of you here today for being part of this important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these inspiring inputs. I think they set the tone nicely for what we have planned here today. And with this, I hope everyone has brought their thinking hats, because we are moving over to session 1, and we're going to try to bring out the knowledge that is in the room with Emily Henderson, humanitarian advisor at DFID, who will be your session facilitator. If you want a roving mic.
Good morning. So I'm Emily Henderson, a humanitarian advisor in the social protection team in DFID. And I wanted to start with a few words on the purpose of the day. So we propose that today, as an end goal, to identify the building blocks that will help us maximize the benefits of integrated information management for social protection systems and for people who benefit and who need it. So it will be about identifying those key actions and key investments that will allow leveraging the opportunities that are out there and that we will discuss and explore during the sessions, but also identifying those challenges and how to overcome them, so that ultimately we can maximize those benefits of digital solutions for integrated information management, and that we can push even further how the sector is progressing in this area. So through initial consultations and a survey, we have put out there on the panels that you can see on the side the very first draft of building blocks, those key actions and investments. And we would like to hear your views on them. So please take your digital hands and papers and pens, and during the day, input into that. And throughout the conversations and discussions, we will be identifying those. And the last panel today will be looking at the approach and those building blocks of how to maximize digital solutions for integrated information management. So let's get started. This first session is about what is it? What is integrated information management? How does it look like? What benefits can it bring? And after a short video that will put us into context, we will hear from Richard Chirchir, who is EMIS specialist at Development Pathways. He will take us through the definitions and concepts of integrated information management, building on the learning so far from countries. After that, we'll hear from Suzio Luhanga, Chief Economist in the Poverty Reduction Social Protection Division in the Ministry of Finance, Economic Planning and Development in Malawi. She will illustrate and bring to life those definitions and concepts, bringing the case of Malawi with the experience of developing and rolling out the country's unified beneficiary registry. Richard, the floor is yours. I think we need a power. Sorry? The video first. Okay.
Let's imagine a country where many government agencies and development partners have programs to help poor and vulnerable households. In this imaginary country, government agencies apply social protection measures that protect people from illness, unemployment, natural disasters, or other crises they may face during their lives. Each agency does this independently. In this country, different program teams work at community level. They visit the same households to gather more or less the same information. This uses precious time and wastes resources. Once this household information is collected, team members feed it into their databases. Yet each database is different, and these databases don't communicate with one another. This makes it impossible to exchange information. What a waste! How could this work differently? Let's be bold and imagine a single, unified and digital social register that fundamentally transforms the way social protection systems work. To do this, let's go back to our imaginary country. In our new scenario, the government and its partners decide to stop fragmenting data collection. Instead, they join forces to find a way to meet everyone's needs. The government agrees to create and use a single template for data collection. It agrees to pull all the household information it collects. It agrees to feed information about services to households back into the new digital system. And it agrees to share the costs for this new system. The government takes action. It sets up a joint database which can be used by all social programs. Every program can now select and manage its beneficiaries and provide benefits without changing its existing information management systems. Each social program now provides feedback into a common database called the Integrated Beneficiary Registry. This registry details who receives services, where and when. This helps the government provide better and more efficient case management. The different programs can now use a single joint payment gateway to reach their beneficiaries. If it's useful, social programs can exchange information with other government databases. A good example of this is the Civil Registry, which stores crucial demographic information, such as births or deaths. This approach improves the coordination of programs, increases transparency and accountability, and allows programs to be linked within the social protection sector and beyond. The result? Greater impact. And it doesn't stop there. Exchanging information also makes program delivery more efficient. It allows agencies to use joint payment channels, and it leaves room for the social protection system to expand if more people suddenly need assistance. And now, let's stop imagining, because in some places, this is already reality. More and more countries are beginning to use integrated information management for social protection. Which country will be next?
So I think with that excellent video, I think I couldn't say more in terms of the benefits of the integration. But I think to begin with, anyway, as that is being, I think we've got a small IT challenge. So anyway, I think as that is being sorted out, I wanted to say that I think integration should be about beneficiaries. It should be about the rights. It should be about ensuring inclusion. So I think today, for example, we are going to see and discuss a lot about how to ensure that we are able to maximize the benefits of integration. So in terms of the agenda, building on what I've just seen, what we have seen in the video, we just want to see the definitions, components of integrated information systems. We want to see a conceptual illustration. What does it actually look like? And in this particular illustration, we will see 3 pillars of an integrated system for information management. Pillar number 1 talks to the program management information systems in terms of their functions. And when we talk about integration, we look at 2 critical pillars. Number 1 are registries. Registries as building blocks for integrated information systems. And number 2 are linkages to broader registries and information systems. So those are the 3 key pillars that allows for the linkages within the ecosystem for information management. And I think the 3rd key area we look at are the requirements for establishing. What are the key prerequisites that you need to have in place to be able to have a functional and an integrated system for information management? So let's begin with a definition. I think most of us, when we think about the information system for information systems or a management information system, we think in terms of the hardware and software. So that is very easy for us to be able to conceptualize. But I think today we want to look at a broader definition of information system and say it's a tool that allows for capture, transmission, analysis of data, and management information system. So in that particular respect, the critical aspect that I want to emphasize today in the morning is the brainware. If you don't have enough capacity in terms of the resources, trained personnel to be able to operate your information management system, what is going to happen is you have what we call a white elephant. You'll have a system that will not be used. So in terms of components, we need to be able to see a management information system more broadly, consisting of hardware infrastructure, consisting of software and databases, consisting of transmission mechanisms, and consisting of the brainware in terms of the human beings who are going to manage it. And in that particular respect, we know that as we move towards digital systems, the transmission systems they could be network, mobile, telephony, and all that. But some programs in a number of countries still use vehicles to be able to move paper around from all the sub-district offices to the national level. So that gives us a bit of a conceptual view of what we would call the management information system. In terms of the potential elements, as I said, there are 3 pillars. Pillar number 1 is what we call the program management information system functions. Pillar number 2 is what we call the social protection registries. And pillar number 3 are product sector registries and information systems. So we want to actually dig deeper and see exactly what are the key components of these individual pillars. So in terms of the program MIS functions, there are a number of functions that a program management information system should be able to do. These functions are either their core services and their additional services. In terms of the core services, the first function is registration and assessment. That means selection and registration of beneficiaries. So if you've got your program management information system and it's not able to do registration of your beneficiaries, then you've got a problem. That is one of the key fundamental functions. Number 2 is what we call the beneficiary management. Once you have the beneficiaries enrolled in your program, the other critical function to be able to undertake include changes in terms of updates of beneficiary details. For example, beneficiaries could choose to change their recipients or proxies who take their payments. You've got the changes in terms of the information, in terms of their addresses and all that. And of course, more importantly, is beneficiaries who are enrolled sometimes have to be exited or removed from the program. So that is also extremely important in terms of a function of an efficient program management information system. The other key function is you need to be able to have a complaints and grievance mechanism in place to be able to receive the feedback of how well your program is functioning. And as a result, you need to have a management information system having the capability to be able to register the complaints and a mechanism to be able to resolve the complaints in a timely manner. The other critical thing is this program, social protection schemes, exist to provide some support. It's either cash or in-kind benefit to the beneficiaries. So you need to have the capability to be able to produce payment lists, to be able to make reconciliations. You can imagine, for example, a program in Pakistan, Benazir Income Support Program. It's got a payroll of 6 million beneficiaries. If that was going to be done manually, that is going to be extremely cumbersome. So you need a tool that you can just by click of a button, you're able to produce a payroll, be able to share with the payment service providers, and be able to do reconciliations. The other function is monitoring and reporting. So management information systems should be able to support the program administrators to know when different events happen. Different processes should happen and provide reports for monitoring the program in terms of the efficiency. So those are what we would call the minimum functions of any social protection program or a scheme. Additional functions include monitoring of conditions and compliance, especially for conditional cash transfer schemes. For example, tracking of the school enrollments and attendance. Others include, for example, immunizations and any other conditions that could be set by schemes. The other function include, for example, referrals and managing the cases. For example, linking the social protection programs to, say, child protection services and monitoring of these particular referrals. So those are additional services depending on the type of the social protection program that you have. So with those particular functions, that is the program MIS, Program Management Information System pillar, the first pillar. Pillar number 2 is what we call the registries. So what is a registry? So if you have, for example, a program and you have its own database, does it qualify to be a registry? So for the purposes of actually building a harmonized definition, what you're calling a registry is a special purpose national information system managed by a dedicated institution, underpinned by a legal framework to be used systematically by multiple programs for limited non-operational function. What do we mean by that? It means if we have a program, say for example, and I think David mentioned Anga Safety Net, working in Kenya, Anga Safety Net could be working very well, collecting data, for example, from the 4 of the poorest counties. It's got a robust database, a scalable database that is able to respond during a crisis or an emergency. But it doesn't qualify to be a national social registry, okay? Because a registry should be something national. It should be underpinned by laws, either policies, decrees, acts of parliament, and it should be used to ensure that other programs do not collect data by their own. That data should be used systematically for a number of programs. And more importantly, it is not being used for operational functions. In terms of, for example, it's not a system used to make payments and others. It enables linkages with programs, but it doesn't actually act in terms of a number of operational roles. In that particular respect, internationally, there are 2 main registries that are quite recognized. What we've done is try to harmonize the definition. So I think for some people, for example, the first one is social registry, and I think the term is non-contentious in a number of ways. And a social registry is a type of a registry that answers the question, what segment of the population need the benefits? So I think there are quite a number of examples in many countries. We've got Pakistan's Benazir Income Support Program, being the biggest social registry in the world with 7.5 million households. We've got UDB in Indonesia. We've got social registry, UBR in Malawi, and many other countries, and that will be discussed later. Then we have, so this is the social registry in terms of the definition. Then we have what we call the integrated beneficiary registry. And in an integrated beneficiary registry, by definition, it's a registry that answers the question, who is getting what type of support, where, and when. It's about beneficiaries, okay? So if you see that particular distinction, once you have integration, then some benefits or products of that integration come naturally. And one of the benefits include, for example, shock responsive services. Once you have this particular data of beneficiaries, it means, and some payment infrastructure, in case of a shock, you will be able to respond fairly quickly and be able to give the support. Complementary services, it means once you have the beneficiaries, you can be able to provide additional services. So in Kenya, for example, some of the beneficiaries of cash transfer schemes also receive a health subsidy from the government. So you can be able to layer additional services once you have these integrated systems in place. GIS coordination is an interesting concept here. And what it does, it means that it's a capability to be able to have data in a spatial format to inform some decision making. GIS in itself is a very powerful technology in terms of social protection broadly, and it could be used within the integrated beneficiary registry as well as also the social registry. So with that definition, we go into the next pillar. And in the next pillar, we are looking at individually what does it mean to drill down to a social registry information systems. In practice, what does it actually look like? So in a social registry, what it means is you've got a harmonized registration system in terms of an agreement, in terms of the data to be collected. It could be done by paper. It could be done using a web entry. It could be fully digitized using a tablet. And this particular data collection could be done either through census process, as it happens in Indonesia, or it could be done through an on-demand process. And this particular data is then fed into a registry. There is an optional ranking service in terms of, it could be decided that, for example, all the households are ranked from the poorest to the richest. And that is what happens in a number of countries. And then this data is then subsequently shared with a number of programs. So these individual pieces here are programs with their program management information systems. So, and then what is happening in most of the social registries is there is discussion around how do you update a social registry? Do you always have to go and do data collection primarily? No. You could also get some information from broader sector registries, especially the civil registries, to be able to provide an update to your social registry. So those are the key pillars, building blocks. And again, look at the direction of the arrow. From the social registry, the direction is moving from the social registry, sharing the data with a number of program management information systems. So what about integrated beneficiary registry? Integrated beneficiary registry, you've got the data flowing from the program management information systems. So it doesn't do primary data collection. And then it populates this particular integrated beneficiary registry. And from there, the key underpinning rationale is to be able to do monitoring and reporting of what is going on within the social protection sector. And sometimes there is linkages to the broader sector information systems and registries to allow, for example, for connection to national ID, civil registration systems, and so forth. So again, if you look at this, the direction is in the opposite way. The biggest headache for social registries is how to be able to get update information back from the programs. While the headache here is to be able to ensure that there is consistency in terms of the quality of the information coming from the individual program management information systems. So I want to go now to the final pillar, pillar number 3, in terms of the concept, and its broader information sector registries and information systems. And I think the first key one is national IDs. So national IDs, you could look at it in terms of there are 2 ways of categorizing them. There's what you'd call the foundational IDs. So in many countries, for example, you've got birth certificates, you've got national IDs, you've got death certificates, and you've got agencies responsible for doing that. Those are what we call the foundational IDs. And they are very critical in terms of ensuring linkages to the social protection and functionality of social protection systems. So they are important for verification of applicants' authenticity. And I think one of the biggest in the world in terms of national ID is the India's Aadhaar, with more than 1 billion people registered already. Other big ones include the one for Pakistan and many other countries. So in countries where the national ID is not in place, does it mean you stop putting in place a registry or some integrated system for information management? The answer is no. You could, in fact, in some countries, the functional IDs could be generated by the registries and then could be referenced by other programs. Effectively, what it means is if you have, for example, a registration of the entire population in Malawi for the social registry UBR, the unique number could potentially be used as a key reference even before the national ID systems are put in place. The other key database or registry within this broader sector is the disability registry. If there is need, for example, to provide support to disabled persons, it's important that there is a mechanism for registering them, ensuring that they're issued with a unique card or a unique number. And for the purposes of this could be then linked to social protection systems. I know countries, for example, where disabled persons get some top-up allowance because they are disabled. To be able to do that, there is need to have in place a disability registry. The other critical one is income registry. And basically what it means is if you have a social protection system that uses income to verify as a proxy for enrolling the beneficiaries, you need to be able to cross-check that against an income tax registry. So that's a link. That particular link is important. It's been done in countries like South Africa, Brazil, Seychelles, and Mauritius in terms of cross-checking the information from the social protection systems against the income tax registry. So finally, let's look at what do you need. Are we building a monster, or are we building something that is functional? And if so, what would be the key requirements for that? There are two main requirements. You need some policy side of requirements, and you need some operational requirements. From the policy side, to really ensure that there is a sustainable registry in place, you need some legislative and institutional framework, which is linked to e-government. In many countries, the e-government sets out exactly the policies in terms of the interoperability, the way the systems are able to talk to each other, the laws. We know very much, we are in Europe now, we know the GDPR and exactly what it sets as limits and all that. That would be covered as part of the legislations in place. Then you also need a national social protection policy or strategy, and it should be able to explain, at a very high level objectives for integration. It should be able to set out very, very clearly and the type of the model for integrated system. Because I think, partly speaking, integration is not just about the technology alone. It's also a policy, it's also a political issue that needed to be debated at a high level. Then you need some governance frameworks. You need some institutions that are set to be able to respond. Capacity is a major, major issue in many developing countries, so you don't want to put in place a system that maybe 3 or 4 years down the line will collapse because there is no capacity to be able to sustain it. Budget is always a big issue, and I think sometimes it's underestimated. So it's not just the initial setup costs that need to be factored in. Also, the entire total cost of ownership, the maintenance cost should be also thought through to be able to have that long term. And then I think I've mentioned the issue of the need for foundational civil registration systems that actually can be able to provide either secondary data in terms of update and all that. Operationally, you need operational capacity. In many countries, there would be need to have a team responsible for promotion, for research, and information technology. You don't just need IT experts. You need economists, you need planners, you need social protection policy people to be able to run and manage your integrated system. You need, of course, the hardware infrastructure. And I think hosting is a major, major issue. In many countries where you have challenges to do with electricity reliability, you have challenges to do with the internet. So the big issue is, do you host in cloud? What about the privacy and all that? So these have to be decided also as part of the feasibility in terms of setting up this. Software is not normally a major issue that can always be decided, whether you do open source or you do some custom off the shelf. You can always do a terms of reference and do a tender to be able to get appropriate software. And I think there would be need always to put in place operational guidelines, technology, manuals, trainings, and all that to be able to do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard, for reminding us the key categories and bringing the framework for our conversations today. Susio, please. I propose that we wait till the end of the presentation for some questions of clarification. So Susio is going to bring to us the example of Malawi to bring those concepts and definitions to life.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I'll give you a presentation on the Malawi. I'll try to bring to life what Richard was talking about. So I'll talk about the experience that Malawi has had so far in terms of the development of the social registry for the country. In terms of outline, I'll just start by giving you the policy framework for us to understand where we're coming from. And I'll talk about the evolution of the existing institutional structures. And I'll also talk about what the UBR is for Malawi so that you can understand specifically what we talk about when we mention the UBR. And I'll talk about the key features of the UBR and then the expected benefits in terms of why we developed the UBR. So in terms of the policy framework, that's what we have. Overall, at the national level, we have a national development strategy, what we are calling the Malawi Growth and Development Strategy. At the moment, we have the third one. And as the ministry, we are guided by a policy. We have the National Social Support Policy, which was developed in 2012. This is what is guiding the implementation of social protection programs in the country. And in terms of the actual implementation of this policy, we developed the Malawi National Social Support Program. We initially had a program that was phased out in 2016, so we now have the second Malawi National Social Support Program. And this one is built mostly on 5 pillars. We're actually trying to make sure that the social protection programs are shock sensitive. So we're building all the systems around these 5 pillars. And as government, we have prioritized 5 main programs. We have the public works programs. We also have the social cash transfer program. We are also implementing the microfinance, village savings and loans. And lastly, we have the school meals program. So in terms of the evolution of the institutional structures, I want to give you an idea in terms of where we are coming from and why we actually decided as government to develop the Unified Beneficiary Registry. So initially, as you can see, we had different committees. I think this was mentioned at the beginning, the issue, when we were looking at the video, it was mentioned that in the different countries, you find that each program implementer going to the communities to implement their own individual programs. So this was also the case in Malawi where we had different committees, and this was at national level where we were not really coordinating. And even in the districts, for each program implementer, they could go back to the, for example, if we have public works program, we could have 2 different implementers. So each was going back to the villages to do their own data collection using the same staff. To collect this information. So we saw this as one of the major challenges. And secondly, for the different implementers, they were actually using their own targeting criteria. So there was no coordination in terms of the targeting criteria. So if we have, for the same example of the public works program implementers, you could find that each program had its own targeting criteria. And we're saying, why do you have to go back to the communities to do the targeting when we are all targeting the same beneficiaries? And the last major challenge was that because they were using their own targeting criteria, so they were developing actually different databases in terms of implementation. So you can see that this fragmentation was really a challenge for us, especially as the ministry, because our key role is to provide coordination in the implementation of social support programs. So the challenge that we had was, how do we ensure that we are able to measure the impact of these various programs, because all of them were fragmented. So if we could have someone coming to ask us, even like for the Minister of Finance, they're asking us if we had to request for funding, we have to justify why we need it. But then we were unable to measure the impact that the different social protection programs had on the ground. So what we did was we developed a program, what we are calling the Social Support System Strengthening Program. And the main objective of this program was to improve in terms of the coordination. So we had to make sure that we actually harmonize all these things, the challenges that we are facing. So the first thing that we did was to harmonize the institutional structures in terms of coordination. So we had to make sure that at the national level, we developed the harmonized committees. So for the different programs, we have the thematic working group. For example, for the social cash transfer, for the different implementers. They're actually working together through the thematic working group where they meet. They have regular meetings, and then they are able to share progress in terms of implementation, and then also discussions in terms of how they can do better harmonization in terms of program implementation. So even on the policy level, we also have a National Social Support Steering Committee, which is comprised of representatives from the various institutions. These are government as well as development partners. So we are all meeting together to make sure that we actually agree in terms of what activities that we'll implement in the districts. So in the district as well, we also have harmonized committees. We have the District Social Support Committee, which is actually, instead of having the different program implementers going to the districts, meeting the people individually, so for all the program implementers at the district level, they're actually going through this District Social Support Committee for any implementation of social support programs. So this has helped in terms of harmonization. And the second thing that we did as a ministry is to develop a harmonized data collection tool. So instead of each individual program going back to the villages to collect the information, what we did at the central level was for all of us as government as well as development partners, and we're also including the private sector and then governmental organizations. So we looked at development of a tool, like, okay, if you're a public works program, what do you want for us to collect in the villages? If you're implementing a social cash transfer program, what is it that you need to be on this tool in order for us as government to just do one single data collection, and then we are able to collect all this information that will be used across the different programs. So that's what we did as a country. And then because of this harmonized data collection tool, that's what assisted us in order to come up with a single database, because we have harmonized this tool, so we are using this as a basis for the unified beneficiary registry. So this is just a picture in terms of how we envisage the vision for us when we talk about the unified beneficiary registry. Because Richard was telling us the IT side of it, but for us as a ministry, the challenge that we have is to communicate to not only our stakeholders, but even the people in the communities, for them to understand when we go to them and tell them, we are collecting this information for the unified beneficiary registry, what is it that we are talking about? So when you look at the term itself, we are calling it the Unified Beneficiary Registry. But for Malawi, this is more than a Unified Beneficiary Registry in the sense that the information that is collected here, it's not just about the beneficiaries, but we are also collecting information for potential beneficiaries. So when we're looking at it, we have a database. We're using data collection mostly is being done using a tablet. So as already said, we are using the existing structures. So we use people at the district level, what we are calling the extension workers. They are the ones that are involved in the data collection process. So this is being done using a tablet. And once all this information is collected using the harmonized data collection tool, it is stored in what we are calling a granary for the countries. So this is a local storage facility. So people can store maize, groundnuts, beans in this local granary. So I want you to understand in terms of how we are seeing it, because we are collecting information, socioeconomic as well as demographic, so that will be able to be used across the different programs. So that's the granary for Malawi, the UBR. So in terms of the usage, as you can see, the picture at the top, we're talking about the public works program. If they want to identify their own beneficiaries, so they come to us in the UBR and they tell us, we actually ask them, what is it that you're using in terms of identification of your beneficiaries? So for public works program, for instance, they're looking for the ultra-poor households who have labor, so they'll come to the UBR and tell us their criteria, and they'll be able to access this information from the UBR. The same is true for the social cash transfer program. For them, the focus is on ultra-poor households without labor. So they also come to the UBR, and then we're able to share this information with them. So as you can see, these are the 5 main programs. But as I already mentioned, we are not restricting this to only social support programs. We want other program implementers to also be able to access this information. So for example, if you want to do vertical expansion where you are targeting maybe social cash transfer beneficiaries in case of maybe a disaster in a certain area, so you can just come and say, okay, we are looking for information beneficiaries of social cash transfer program in village X, and you'll be able to access this. And we're also even encouraging this for the members of parliament when we go to the villages. For example, if they want to, they have sourced some resources and they want to implement a school bursary, so they'll be able to come to us and tell us that I want to identify maybe girls in a certain village, in my village, and I want to help them out. So they'll be able to access this information from the UBR. So in terms of the key features of the UBR, the first one, which is the main feature, is that there's government ownership. As you can see from the evolution, the UBR itself came from government's wish. We actually decided that given the challenges that we are facing as a country, what is it that we can do to make sure that there's better harmonization across the different stakeholders? So because of this, you see that in terms of ownership, everything else is, the source is government, and even the implementation is being led by the government. So this is important in terms of ensuring that there's sustainability. And the second key feature is the collaborative approach that we have used. And this is not only in terms of the development, because in terms of the development, it was developed by a team of 7 experts. 6 were IT, and the 7th one was on the policy side. I was honored to actually lead this team of 7 experts. And this team of experts, they were already attached to different institutions. So we had people from the Local Development Fund. We also had people from the GIZ and from COMSIP, as well as the National Library. So you could see that these are people that are already in government and outside government as well. But we worked together to make sure that we developed this vision, what we were seeing as a vision for the government. So in terms of management, this is also being done by the different stakeholders. So it is not just left to government, but it is working with the different stakeholders. And also in terms of resources, it was more or less the pooled funding, where we had we came up with a work plan, a rollout plan, and we had different development partners and government coming in terms of what they could actually fund in terms of making sure that this dream becomes a reality. So we were working with people from UNICEF, we were working from people from GIZ, the likes of RAF, for example. So we could see that we were different people, but all of us had the same goal in terms of making sure that there was that collaborative approach. And then we also have the national training team, which is the one that is actually rolling out, when we were rolling out the UBR, they are the ones that goes out to the districts to train the district teams on the data collection. So the data collection is not being done by the national level, but we are using the district teams to do their own data collection. So in terms of the composition of the national training team, it is also comprised of people from different institutions. So we have people from the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Gender, Ministry of Local Development, Ministry of Community Development, and development partners, all forming this national training team, which then does the training, and then it is also involved in terms of supervision to make sure that the data that we are collecting is of good quality. Another issue that we see as a key feature of the UBR is in terms of sustainability. So in terms of the development itself, what was the challenge initially was that we have talked about different systems that are developed by, you find that they are developed by maybe a consultant who comes in, develops this very fancy system, and after that consultant leaves 3-4 years down the line, you find that the system collapses. So we tried to, as government, to make sure that we develop something that we thought could actually be sustainable. It should be user-friendly, it should be easier to use for everyone, and to make sure that it is developed on a platform that is not very complicated. So in terms of this, we used a local team of experts to make sure that there was knowledge transfer. So we also worked with an international consultant, and this time around we were working with Richard and his team to make sure that we were able to work together to have a system that was sustainable in the long run. And another key thing on this is that we also used the existing structures. As already mentioned, that if we had created parallel structures, there could have been resistance, especially in the districts. Like, why are you bringing people from different districts to come and collect information in our districts? Why do you have to create all these parallel structures? So we made sure that in the districts, we are using the people that were already on the ground, who already know about their district information, they already know about their communities. So we have involved these people to make sure that the information that we are collecting is sustainable in the long run. So even when we go back during the updating of the data in the UBR, we know that it will be much easier because we don't have to start afresh. We'll be working with some of them that already have been involved in the data collection process. The fourth key feature is in terms of multipurpose. I already explained that the UBR is not just confined to the social protection programs. So we are trying to make sure that there's linkage across the programs outside the social support programs. Another key feature is in terms of quality. We had to make sure that the information that was collected was, did not have any questions in terms of the level of quality. So right at the beginning, we had the involvement of the National Statistics Office with support from GIZ. We were able to recruit people from, not recruit them, we were actually able to involve them during the rollout, the data collection itself. So we had specific people placed in the districts to make sure that if there were any issues in terms of the quality of the data, they were already addressed right there and then, instead of waiting until the end of the data collection to rectify the problems. We also had the involvement of the National Registration Bureau. As already mentioned, the issues of ID is a big thing. And when we were starting out for the data collection, initially we did not have the national IDs in place for Malawi. So what we did was to just put in place a unique identifier and leave a space for the national IDs for when they are rolled out. So when we are going to the next districts, actually we'll be able to collect this information using the national ID. And the second thing in terms of quality assurance, we also did independent assessments. So in the UBR, the team itself that developed the UBR, we also had 2 people that were dedicated solely for quality assurance. These were trained, and they were the ones, once the UBR was being developed, they were doing the continuous quality assurance to make sure that the UBR was user-friendly. And also, we also had an independent assessment done by a QA expert who was also engaged with support from GIZ to make sure that they went through the system. And we also had an assessment by the World Bank, an independent assessment after the data collection process to make sure that they were able to inform us on areas that needed improvement in order for us to improve on those when we were rolling out to the other districts. Another issue is on data privacy and security. So to ensure that we were able to protect the sensitivity of this data, we have developed the data sharing protocols and procedures. So for each institution that wants to access information in the UBR, they have to actually write to the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development, to our ministry, so that they get approval to use this information. So they have to clearly state why they want this information. And we also have the IT security protocols and procedures to make sure that this is also protected. And lastly, we have the communication framework, and this one has been recently developed after seeing that the issue of communication was really a challenge when we were rolling out the data. People couldn't understand what the UBR is, the difference between the UBR and the specific programs. So sometimes people could give us maybe fraudulent, wrong information just because they were thinking that if you're registered in the UBR, then automatically you are eligible for benefits. But we have tried to implement this especially as we are rolling out to the additional districts, to make sure that the people understand why they need to register. And initially, I should also mention that we were rolling out at 50% of the households. So initially, we were just targeting 50% of poor households. But as we are rolling out to the rest of the districts, what we're doing is we want to roll out 100% all households in the districts. But in order to do this, we have to make sure that we are sending the right communication, to make sure that the people are registering, and especially the poor people that we're targeting, we have to make sure that they're being registered. So I'll quickly take you through the expected benefits. The first one is in terms of coordination. It has helped us in terms of harmonizing the, what we're seeing is we'll harmonize the instruments, and this harmonization is in terms of the targeting. We also see the harmonization in terms of the payment systems as well as the grievance redress mechanisms. This is what we were expecting as a benefit of the UBR. And another one is in terms of resource pooling, by having different stakeholders pulling resources together to achieve one goal. The second expected benefit is in terms of inclusiveness, and this one will be achieved in terms of 100% targeting of the households, as well as making sure that we take advantage of the linkages and complementarities across the programs. The other one is in terms of transparency, especially with the feedback group, because we're expecting that the programs will be giving us feedback once they have enrolled the beneficiaries in the programs. And also in terms of cost saving, because of the harmonized data collection process, sorry, in terms of the harmonized data collection process itself, we're seeing this as a cost-saving measure. And also in terms of shock sensitivity, we'll be able to roll out in terms of expansion, especially for the humanitarian sector. And lastly, in terms of accountability, so we are now better able to ensure that there's accountability in terms of the use of resources, as well as the effectiveness of the program. So because of this and the feedback loop, we're seeing that as a ministry, we'll now be able to carry out meaningful impact evaluations, as well as to be able to track graduation of the beneficiaries. That is it for my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Susie. So, Richard, you gave us the framework with two key concepts, the integrated beneficiary registries and the social registries. And Susie, you really brought to life one model of social registry, giving us and illustrating the policy requirements, the operational requirements, and highlighting the benefits, not only from an efficiency and a programmatic perspective, but also for people, right? The results for them, and contributing to leaving no one behind. So, we have a few minutes for questions. I suggest we focus on clarifications because the debate will happen in the next sessions. Any questions? Please, I might take three to go. So we have one here behind and then on the side.
Thanks very much. My name is Ole Döttinger. I'm from GIZ. I work in Cambodia on ID Poor, which is the Cambodian Social Assistance Registry. It already now fulfills the majority of the functions that we've heard mentioned this morning. We have about 2.5 million beneficiaries. We cover the entire country, and we already exist since several years. I have two questions, which are very relevant also to my work. First of all, people's situation change. Children are born, people move to the city to find work. Some people fall ill, there are other catastrophic events. So in the case of Malawi, how do you keep it updated? How often do you collect data? And my second question, again, specific to Malawi, although Richard, if you have something to add, of course, I'll be interested, is how do you, once you give the targeting data to the different programs, how do you monitor the benefits that the beneficiaries actually get? How do they report back? How do you ensure that they report back? Thanks very much.
Shall we take the question? There was one question on the row behind and then one in this sector. Yes, please.
Yes, hi, my name is Anna von Rönne from Healthy Developments. I would like to know, what do you mean by 100% targeting? So, I mean, I know Malawi a little bit. I know that there are very many poor people. So, I mean, in these villages, do you target everybody when you say 100% targeting?
And the third one was somewhere here. Yeah, please.
Okay, my name is Ulrike from GIZ Nepal. You talked about the beneficiary registry. Is there also a registry on the benefit providers? Because I think something needs to be linked in many countries, there are many organizations providing benefits. And is there a registry of them that you can also link it to the beneficiary registry?
Thank you. So let's start. Susie, so you had two questions, one on the update and one on 100% targeting. And if you want to address any of the others as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for the questions. I'll start with the first question about updating of the UBR. Maybe something that I should have mentioned is that the UBR was developed in 2016. So the actual rollout began in 2017, and we have 28 districts in Malawi. And so far, we have collected information for 11 districts. For the 10 districts, we're doing this at 50%. And for the one district, it was more or less like a pilot where we rolled out to the whole district. So in terms of the frequency of updating, we have guidelines. We have UBR operational guidelines. So in there, we have indicated in terms of the frequency, and the agreement is that we'll be updating every 4 years. As much as we would want to update it frequently, but you can understand that we're now in the learning phase. So I want to make sure that we have rolled out the UBR to all the districts before we start the updating. So in terms of the frequency, all I can say is that it will be done every 4 years. The second question in terms of how we are monitoring the benefits to ensure that they are monitoring. At the moment, for the UBR, we have linked it to the social cash transfer program, what we are calling the Ntukula Bakomo, as well as the public works program, what we are calling the Ntandizi. So for these two programs, MIS, the requirement is that once they start enrolling their beneficiaries, there'll be a feedback loop where once they receive benefits, then it will be indicating in the UBR that this maybe household A is now a beneficiary. But at the moment, for the social cash transfer program, they're just rolling out, they're doing their enrollment. So they haven't started giving out the transfers yet. But that's what we are seeing, that once they start enrolling them, they receive the transfers. In the UBR, it will show that this household is a beneficiary of that particular program. And the third question in terms of 100% targeting, yes, initially we were doing it at 50%, as much as we would have liked to go to all the households, but the challenge initially was in terms of the resources to target all the beneficiaries. Not all the beneficiaries, but the potential beneficiaries. So we did it at 50%, and the reason was that at that particular time, the poverty level for Malawi was at 50.7%. So we had to do a national average across all the districts to make sure that we're capturing at least 50% of the households. But that was it for the 10 districts. But for the 18 remaining districts, we are going to all the households. But we are only concentrating on the rural households, not the ones in the urban areas. And the reason was because when we developed the harmonized data collection tool, what we realized was that the questions were not applicable to the urban areas. So we are now thinking of, not actually thinking, we're developing a tool to make sure that we are able to capture information for even the people in the urban areas. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a question on registering the benefit providers, but maybe, Richard, also you can give us if there are other examples of updating registries and monitoring benefits.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think the updating is one of the major issues to deal with, and hopefully we'll continue consulting and speaking to this particular issue in the course of the conference. So I know, for example, in Indonesia, with a registry, a social registry of 25.7 million households, they are currently doing an experiment in terms of doing dynamic updates, because you don't want to be doing a census every 4 or 5 years. So the intention is to be able to think through other secondary ways of actually updating the registry, because it becomes very expensive. So one of the ways is, I think we mentioned, is you need to be able to see maturity in terms of civil registration system and the way that data can be able to feed back in terms of births, in terms of deaths and all that. But more importantly is what Susho is emphasizing is, if data is shared from the registry to the programs, that data should flow back. Ideally, it should flow back. So programs have a bit of a challenge. So there should be a memorandum of understanding, there should be mechanisms Ideally, there should be automated ways in which data can be able to flow back, to be able to update and enrich the registry so that you don't make a same investments every 4 or 5 years in terms of doing the census when you've actually been doing that. So a lot of experiments are actually ongoing in many countries to be able to nail that issue. Something to mention because of the terminology is Malawi's social registry is called Unified Beneficiary Registry, but actually it is a social registry. Different countries have different names. So in Kenya, Kenya has an integrated beneficiary registry, which feeds in data from multiple schemes. It doesn't go and collect the data primarily, but we call it a single registry. So I think today, we just want to ensure that everybody harmonize the terminology in terms of we know what's a social registry and what's an integrated beneficiary registry. So back to the issue of benefit providers, that can always be part of the information that is actually kept by these registries. So I think it doesn't require a separate one, a separate database in itself, but it's just a file, part of the information that is actually kept by these registries to know which of the organization has actually been receiving and what service they actually provide in part of the social protection information management ecosystem. So I think those are my key comments on the...
Thank you. We have room for more questions, if you have. So let's start 1, 2, and 3, and 4.
Thank you. My name is Pablo Suarez from the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center. And something about the animation in the beginning really hit me. It said how each team has its own registry process, etc. What a waste. No one likes waste, but there are reasons for the origin of waste, which tends to be selfish behavior and the desire to control what is and isn't done. So when you propose to go from different teams spend their money to get their thing into one big soup of harmony and collaboration, what has been the successful approaches to create that collaboration? Has it been that the Ministry of Finance says, I won't give you money unless you show up to this workshop and do as I say? Has it been a bottom-up, let's all work together because we're being wasteful? Has it been the donors? Has it been something else? What can we do to do more of this? Thank you.
Sorry. Here?
I'll be very quick. Just to follow on from Pablo's point, my name's Daniel Longhurst. Sometimes there's also fragmentation by design. For instance, if you consider humanitarian approaches and systems, neutrality, impartiality, independence, etc. So how is this being looked at in terms of creating sufficient firewalls between data and between systems to protect approaches that sometimes are designed to be somewhat independent of an integrated government system?
We had one behind there at the end. Oh, okay, let's do here, then there, then here. Yeah, first here and then here.
My name is Jürgen Hohmann from the European Commission. The question that I have is also related to fragmentation, and that's what we call what is the social registries. So we are all working in relation to social protection systems which go beyond just the poor. So when we talk about the registries and social registries, I often get the impression a social registries is only that one which can benefit the poor. So, but we have other systems of social protection which are insurance systems for the private sector, which are governmental systems where large transfers are going to government civil servants. So my question is, if we talk about social registries, how we include all systems together and not just simply the poorest ones. Because all what you talk about, privacy, it's a major issue. And we can see the confidence of the better off if they are also willing to have their data stored in the same kind of system. And the last question related to that is, when we came to the conference today, we had to give our consent. It was surprisingly in paper and not digital. But I wanted to know, is there also consent to be given? And what happens if people don't give consent? Allow me to make a last link to the last World Social Protection Report, where we have seen that only 45% of the population is covered with at least one single social protection benefit. And in African countries, it's often only 20%. That's what the report says to us. Do we have data already available? How many of the population are registered in such kind of registries today?
Okay, that was a multiple question. One here. Here. Behind. Sorry. We'll come here.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sylvie from GIZ Malawi. My question is around legal frameworks and how important it is in when you establish social registries, and how difficult it is in many countries that don't really have a legal setting. So the question is, I'd actually be interested in those countries that have established a legal framework, would you be able to give one or two concrete examples, maybe to Richard, of how this legal framework has been used? Thanks.
Thank you, and sorry, I have to cross here. Thank you very much. And then we'll...
Good morning, everybody. I'm Rick Goodman from DAI. My question is for the Chief Economist. Malawi has obviously made very impressive gains in its leadership and setting the policy and regulatory framework for the UBR, as you described. In Malawi, there's also sort of a separate world of the humanitarian aid delivery. Could you just explain your vision for how you might in future extend kind of access and data and so on to humanitarian aid delivery? Maybe, or maybe Richard can tell you how to implement your vision as well. Thank you.
Good. Wow, so we are getting into the into the works. So maybe, Susio, you can start with, we heard questions about incentives and motivations. Where does it come from? The soup, what creates the soup of harmony and collaboration? We heard about data, protection and consent, and the question of linking with humanitarian, this parallel world, potentially.
All right, thank you. I'll start by the question on the soup. How do we ensure that everyone is involved? I'm sure a lot of you agree with me in terms of how difficult it is. Now that we are presenting the successful picture and the successful story, I think we can all appreciate, and we may think that, it has been so straightforward. But I can tell you that it wasn't very easy. We had to grapple with challenges in terms of, especially for us, in terms of when we came up with this vision that as a ministry we want to develop something by the local team. The challenge was we do not have enough resources, but we want these resources, especially from development partners. How do we ensure that they put their trust in us in order to deliver this? So it wasn't easy in terms of to begin with, but I think what I can say is that if you have a vision, and this vision is shared by the different stakeholders, and this includes having meetings and more meetings and more meetings, and where you're making sure that everybody is involved in these meetings, because once you leave out any key stakeholder and they feel that they're being left out, you are sure to receive resistance from these people. So we had to make sure that we had this vision. We developed a concept note, and this concept note was shared by the different development partners. And little by little, when we started telling them why we really wanted this as a ministry and why it had to be developed in that particular way, then there was eventually buy-in from the different stakeholders, and not all of them came in at the same time. Some started with us in this small boat, but eventually people jumped in to make sure that they were part of this shared vision, and that's why we are here where we are today. So that's what I wanted to say, I think, for the case of Malawi. Secondly, the question in terms of the consent. As we talked about that, the information that we are collecting is very sensitive because you can link that particular person in terms of their economic status and all that. So to make sure that we are collecting this information and they don't come back to us to say, why are you sharing our information? Before we actually administer the tool, we explain to them why we are collecting that particular information, and then we ask for their consent for us to collect this information. So they have the right as households to say no if they don't want to participate, but we still urge them to tell them the benefits of registering in the UBR and the potential benefits in future and any losses in case they do not register. So we really have to make sure that they give us this consent. And at the end of the interview, you thank the household for their information, and then we give them there's a form where they have to sign that the information that they have given us, we can actually use it. So we also leave it with them. We leave a copy with them to make sure that they also have the evidence that they gave us the information freely. We did not force them to do it. So that's the consent form that they have to sign as a household. And the third question in terms of our vision for the UBR and the humanitarian sector, I'm happy to say that this is a reality actually in Malawi because we work hand in hand with the humanitarian sector. So when I was mentioning about the harmonized data collection tool, part of the questions are also applicable to the humanitarian sector. So when we are talking about the key stakeholders that we work with, we're also working with the humanitarian sectors, such as the DFID. We're working with a number of stakeholders. So because of this, the harmonized data collection tool itself, at the moment, the information is usable even for the humanitarian sector. But the challenge that we have with the humanitarian sector is that they need frequent updates. Because if there's a disaster, the information that they need is instant. So at the moment, we want to try out in, I think we have 2 districts where we have already collected information to see how they can actually use this information in order to identify the people that are in need. So I think that's something that it's a really good initiative. And I think that because of this, and when different stakeholders come in for the frequent updates, because as much as we'd want to have the frequent updates, the challenge is the resources that go into it, not just the money, but the time, because remember, we are using the same district people. So these are still discussions that are underway, and I think from the pilot that we are going to have this year, we'll be able to know in terms of whether we can improve in terms of the frequency of the update from the 4 years to maybe a shorter period. Thank you.
Thank you. And Richard, you might want to add, but we also had questions on how to integrate all the systems and not only the poor, and how many of the poor people in need are registered from the latest studies and the legal frameworks.
So let me start with
2 minutes.
Yeah, in 2 minutes. Let me start with the legal frameworks. I think the concrete example, I think maybe Felipe will be able to speak to all the country examples later. But I think one of the examples that comes to mind is Chile. Chile have a legislation called Decreto Supremo, a specific clause that enforces all the players in terms of integration and ensures that they're able to share the data. Because if you don't have it, what it means is you are at the mercy of some key powerful players. At some point, they'll just create a silo and just frustrate you. The other one is on the issue of population of registries. I think that may be answered as we progress through the conference in terms of the numbers. I think there is research which was done by DFAT. There is a lot of work which has been done by the World Bank on this space, so maybe we can hold on that. I think the other one was on exactly. So social registries and integrated beneficiaries are just one form of integrated information systems. And a lot, if you look at, say, middle-income countries and high-income countries, what you see is social protection is offered across the entire life cycle. So what does it mean? So in South Africa, for example, a beneficiary walks into a single window, they make an application, they are assessed based on their own individual means test, and then they can be eligible to a number of social benefits. That should happen also in a number of developed countries. So in that particular respect, I know, for example, Turkey has a linkage to more than 90 other government databases. For you to be able to do that, so we need to be able to move beyond just the conversation on the social registries and integrated beneficiary registries to looking at broader integrated systems that ensures bigger efficiency gains that can be achieved across the entire ecosystem of social protection. So I think that's very critical to mention that. Having said that, I think hopefully later we will also address the issues of risks. Like when you have, for example, linkages, your personal data being linked to other 90 databases, what potentially can the government do with that? That's really empowering the government to be able to do so much about that. So, and I know there is this greater awareness about the GDPR and exactly in terms of automated computation and what potentially it could do. And I think there is a question in terms of, as development partners, as social protection practitioners, what does it actually mean to be able to provide support? Are you allowed to replicate the same I would say, rules in all the other developing countries? So I think there are a number of issues and risks that have to be managed later, but I think that's a separate conversation to be able to approach. In terms of critical success factors, which was your question, there's got to be benefits, there've got to be programs, there've got to be something that goes to the beneficiaries before you actually think about setting up these systems. I've seen some countries, for example, try to set it up before they even have the programs. For me, I think you start by having programs, then you have some disruptions, then you have some problems, then you actually try to put in place integration. I would not want to go the other way where you say, okay, let me set up, let me go and register everybody in the country, and you don't even have a program, because that potentially raises a lot of expectations, and that can be potentially problematic, even politically. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious that we haven't answered all questions, but you both are here during the break, so I'm already booking your break. Thank you so much for setting the scene, and we are going to hand over to our Master of Ceremony.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, that was already a lot of information. Thank you for the lively discussion. Thank you for the inputs. I think this laid the ground quite well for session 2, which will come after a break that we've all deserved. There should be coffee outside. Please be back at 11:15. Thank you.